are trying to crank up some right-wing conspiracy theories. But make no mistake, we intend to move forward and try to promote both the Press Act and our constitutional protections. There is, of course, little evidence of ideological bias at CBS News, as has been suggested, and even if those allegations were true, Congress would risk exceeding its constitutional authority by intervening. Private news organizations, whether CBS, MSNBC, or Fox, speak through their journalist employees. If Congress tried to punish or shape news coverage, either directly through legislation or indirectly through a pressure campaign, it would run afoul of the spirit, if not the letter, of the First Amendment, and potentially violate the news organization's free speech rights and its right to editorial control over its own content. So, today, we hope to inquire further from our witnesses about the importance of a federal SHIELD Act and why it is long past time for Congress to enact it. Our democracy is already under assault on numerous fronts, and we should not be adding fuel to the fire. So let's focus instead on something that would actually protect press freedom, would be completely within our Article 1 authority and duties. And let's talk about the critical need for a federal reporter's shield legislation. I thank our witnesses for being here, and I yield back.
Committee will be in order. I thank the ranking member, the gentlelady from Pennsylvania, Ms. Scanlon, for her opening statement. I now recognize the chairman of the full committee, Mr. Jordan, for his opening statement.
I thank the chairman. It's not just the press that's under attack. Every single liberty we enjoy under the First Amendment's been assaulted in the last couple years. I mean, you think about it. Your right to practice your faith, your right to assemble, your right to petition the government, free press, free speech, every right we enjoy. Americans were, a couple years ago, Americans were told they couldn't go to church on Sunday. Think about that. 2.5 years ago, I spoke to the New Mexico Republican Party in Amarillo, Texas, because they had to go to Texas to get the freedom to assemble because they couldn't do it in their own darn state where they pay taxes because their governor wouldn't let them. Your right to petition the government, you want to petition your member of Congress, you couldn't do it at Congress because the speaker wouldn't let you in. Your own darn capital that you pay for. But the most important two are free press and free speech. We're going to hear about the press today and what's happened to two of our witnesses. How freedom of the press, how they went after Miss Atkinson, what happened to Miss Herridge. This is scary. And then just a couple weeks ago, I went to the argument, and this should frighten us all. I went to the argument in front of the Supreme Court. We had a justice on the United States Supreme Court. This is the big censorship case. It's something this committee spent a lot of time on, where big government pressures big tech and big academia to censor speech, not just conservative speech, all speech. That's frightening. And we went to the argument in front of the Supreme Court, and one of the justices said to the Solicitor General from Louisiana, "Counselor, your position has the First Amendment hamstringing the government." That's exactly what it's supposed to do, for goodness sake. So this is about the First Amendment. And a free press is essential to having a robust First Amendment and free debate in our culture. And if you don't have free debate, you can't settle your disputes by arguing and debating, the alternative is frightening. So there is no more important hearing than this. And I want to thank our chairman, and I really want to thank our four witnesses for being here. This is of critical importance. And you know what? This is why we got to pass the Press Shield Act. The House has got it. Let's hope the Senate and the White House can figure this out. We pass this so we don't have this stuff happening to Ms. Herridge. It's happening right now where we actually had a situation in this committee room. So we got some members of this committee who were there that day, where my colleagues on the other side, we had Matt Taibbi on the witness stand, and we had colleagues on the other side pressuring him to divulge his sources in a hearing in Congress. I don't know, to me that's scary as well. So this is a critically important hearing with some great witnesses. I look forward to hearing their testimony and the questions that follow, and with that I yield back.
I thank the chairman. I'll now recognize the ranking member of the full committee, Mr. Nadler, for his opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, over the course of the last 2 decades, repeated overzealous prosecution of leaks to the press have made it clear that Congress needs to enact a federal reporter's shield law. Congress must protect journalists from being compelled to reveal their confidential sources in order to ensure the free flow of information in matters related to the public interest. During the 117th Congress, when I was chairman of the committee, we came together in a bipartisan vote to pass the Press Act, which would protect journalists and their confidential sources from compelled disclosure, except in certain rare circumstances. It later passed the House in similar bipartisan fashion. Unfortunately, the Senate did not act on the bill. I was pleased, however, when the committee, under Chairman Jordan's leadership, built on this strong action and moved the Press Act once again in this Congress in a unanimous vote of 23-0. It again passed the House by voice vote. I think even a casual observer of the 118th Congress understands just how rare it is for me, Chairman Jordan, and practically the entire House all to agree on the need for the same piece of legislation. We have repeatedly come together to advance an important bill on a bipartisan basis. We continue to share the goal of seeing this legislation become law. That is why it is disappointing that, according to news reports, this hearing has not really been called to serve as a forum for building greater support for the bill, as the title of the hearing might suggest. Instead, it appears that its true purpose is to provide a forum to discuss allegations that they are. Congress is not the proper forum for these personal grievances to be aired or resolved. As we listen to the testimony today, we should remember that news media organizations have their own First Amendment rights, which include in a purported conflict over what story to investigate or not to investigate. To do so would, in my view, run afoul of the First Amendment. Indeed, some might even say that this very hearing is an example of the government jawboning the news media over its coverage or lack of coverage of a particular subject and an improper intrusion into the affairs of the press. If the history of overwhelming bipartisan support for the Press Act is any indication, I would hope that we have universal agreement on the dais that the government should respect the independence of the free press, and that we should continue our work to protect journalists from being compelled to reveal their sources. That is where our focus should properly lay. We should be jawboning the real barrier to achieving important protection for press freedom, the United States Senate.